This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
G7 leaders pledged $7.5 billion for COVAX vaccine initiative, and will this finally get things rolling? Mali's interim government expresses willingness to talk to jihadists and hold elections. And the latest on U.S. extreme weather as shortages continue to bite in Texas. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. A South African entrepreneur takes on tire recycling with a trendy touch. And sports enthusiasts impressed by new sports infrastructure in Uganda. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta. Let's begin in the United States, where President Joe Biden has delivered his first speeches to world leaders. He addressed the meeting of the group of 7 leaders, as well as the Munich Security Conference in quick succession. Biden's main message: the U.S. will strengthen its relations with allies to counter competitors and challengers. Timothy Ulrich reports.
America is back.
It was a message to the world and a departure from his predecessor Donald Trump's policies. Biden told the Munich Security Council Washington wants to work with its allies again, including in its approach to Russia, Iran, and China.
You know, we must prepare together for long-term strategic competition with China. Competition with China is going to be stiff. That's what I expect, and that's what I welcome, because I believe in the global system Europe and the United States together with our allies in the Indo-Pacific worked so hard to build over the last 70 years.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel echoed Biden, calling China a competitor. But she said there are some problems that need Beijing as part of the solution.
China is a systemic competitor on the one hand. On the other hand, we need China to tackle global issues such as biodiversity and climate change.
Another statement from President Biden at the Munich Security Conference that contrasted sharply with Trump's position was his call to strengthen NATO. Multilateralism and unity were key themes underlined by world leaders at the conference. Ahead of the G7 and Munich Security Conference, China criticized the use of such terms as what it called a cudgel against other countries.
We have always opposed using multilateralism or multilateral cooperation as an excuse to force the rules made by few countries on the international community. We oppose in particular the use of multilateralism for ideological purposes and creating an alliance against a certain country because of its ideology.
That issue came up in relation to vaccines. French President Emmanuel Macron in his speech urged Europe and the U.S. to send more vaccines to Africa. Leaders during the G7 meeting had already vowed to increase their contributions to the COVAX vaccine mechanism. They said they would up it to a total $7.5 billion, with Washington pledging an extra $4 billion. That was not enough for Macron, who called on the West to send 13 million vaccine doses to Africa before they look for alternatives.
Si nous annonçons des milliards aujourd'hui,
if we announce billions today to only give doses in 6 months, in 8 months, in a year, our African friends will go under the pressure of their population, and rightly so, to buy doses from the Chinese, from the Russians, or directly from other laboratories.
There are a number of countries in Africa and other parts of the world already receiving vaccines from China and Russia. Macron and many in the West see this as a threat to European and American power. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned against division, addressing tensions between China and the U.S. without mentioning them by name.
Our world cannot afford a future where the 2 largest economies split the globe into 2 opposing areas in a great fracture, each with its own dominant currency and trade and financial rules, its own internet, and its own artificial intelligence capacity and strategy.
The UK is set to hold an in-person G7 summit in June, the first since the pandemic began and since Biden took office. Timothy Ulrich, CGTN.
Let's turn our attention to China, where the country has expressed anger after remarks by British Prime Minister Boris Johnson about Xinjiang and Hong Kong to the Munich Security Conference. A statement from the Chinese embassy in London rebuked Britain for attacking what it called China's suppression of the Uyghur people in Xinjiang and its oppressive national security law in Hong Kong. A spokesman said Xinjiang enjoys social stability, economic growth, and ethnic and religious harmony. And the purpose of Hong Kong's national security law is to fix legal loopholes existing in the city's security. He said the law is conducive to the implementation of, quote, one country, two systems, close quote, and the protection of Hong Kong's people's rights. The spokesman said both Xinjiang and Hong Kong are Chinese territory, and no foreign country is allowed to interfere in China's internal affairs in any way. All right, so the G7 leaders have pledged a total of $7.5 billion to the COVAX vaccine sharing initiative. Many poor countries, especially in Africa, were keenly watching for messages like this. Now, is this the magic key for Africa's vaccine shortage? Let's bring in Professor Joachim Osor, the technical director at Amref Health Africa. He joins us live via Zoom from Nairobi. Professor, thank you so much for joining us here on Africa Live. Well, $7.5 billion pledged. Now, do you think this is going to make a difference, Professor?
Yeah, thank you. One, I think it's very good that the Western countries are beginning to realize that COVID will not end unless everyone in the world is safe. Because what we have seen of late is developed countries scrambling to take all the available vaccines, more or less hoarding what is available and leaving the developed world with nothing, to the extent that the COVID vaccine is more expensive in Africa than in Europe. Yet Europe is richer than Africa because the hoarding in Europe has made it more expensive in Africa. So we are happy that they are putting in the money now. That will ease a bit of the pricing. But the COVAX facility is like a stopgap measure, really, to cater for a small population. We expect that maybe up to 20% of those who need to be vaccinated in Africa will get it through the COVAX facility. The rest of it will come from the African countries themselves buying the vaccine and vaccinating their populations. So it is a good thing, but at the same time, Africans must still be able to plan, budget, and purchase more COVID vaccines so that we are able to vaccinate a critical mass.
All right, Professor, important statements that you've made there. Let's pick up on some of the points that you've made. The COVAX facility is taking long to even begin to achieve its mandate. Is money the only issue? From your perspective, how do you see it, Professor?
Money is not the only issue. The problem now is that there are few vaccines which are available, and the companies that are producing them are unable to cope with the demand. So money is an issue, definitely, but also the production is not adequate for the world needs. And so that is why the northern countries are scrambling for the few doses and even ordering in advance and signing contracts with manufacturers so that whatever little that is produced ends up in those countries. So production is really a big issue right now.
All right, Professor, if I understand this correctly, the UN Secretary General is also asking G20 countries to help set up an emergency COVID-19 vaccine task force. Do you see this happening, number one, and can it speed up or slow down the process of rolling out vaccines in Africa? What's your take?
I think WHO is really providing good leadership in terms of trying to convince the world that vaccination is needed everywhere. And those structures they are putting in place are beginning to bear fruit. The advocacy they are doing is what is making these developed countries even put more money into the COVAX facility. So we really appreciate what the UN and what WHO in particular is doing to make vaccines available to the developing world.
All right, Professor Osura, thank you for your context and putting everything into correct format and information for us. That's Professor Joachim Osura, Technical Director at AMREF Health, talking to us. Let's move on now. Naturally occurring mutations of the coronavirus are causing a headache for scientists. A more contagious strain, which first appeared in South Africa in November, has been detected in, listen to this, over 30 countries. It's now raised questions around vaccine development after the AstraZeneca jab showed limited efficacy against this strain in South Africa. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
Findings that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine was not effective against less severe cases of the COVID-19 variant in South Africa sent shockwaves through the scientific world. Vaccine developers have been working to find a treatment against the coronavirus since the onset of the pandemic more than a year ago.
In order to develop a vaccine, the costs are quite astronomical. And I think that is one of the major challenges vaccine developers are facing. And obviously we need to keep up with the virus, try and find out how it's mutated so that it can give us better insight on how to prevent it from infecting a whole lot of people and causing maybe another third or fourth wave.
Medical researchers in South Africa are not giving hope just yet. The Sechaba Research Center on the outskirts of Pretoria is still looking into the effectiveness of AstraZeneca on severe illness. It's also testing the Novavax and Johnson & Johnson vaccines.
We receive those samples from day 0, which is the enrollment day. Then they are sent to the central processing labs where they will be checking for either immunological activities in the sample. Then the MOs will check whether the participant can continue with the other visit for that particular protocol or that study.
I think there is hope, so long as we have facilities like research sites, doctors that are willing to assess participants, most importantly, that are willing to participate in these studies, because without them, we can't test these vaccines.
South Africa is still aiming to achieve herd immunity through mass vaccinations, but basic precautions still need to be followed.
Even if we still vaccinate, we still need to follow those guidelines where we socially distance, we wear our masks, and we wash our hands.
While scientists try to figure out how to contain the spread of the highly infectious variant circulating around the world, it's likely that the coronavirus will never be completely eradicated and that regular vaccinations may be required. Julie Shire, CGTN, Pretoria, South Africa.
Let's go to Somalia, where clashes erupted yesterday as opposition leaders defied a ban on public gatherings to protest about the delayed polls. International flights to Mogadishu's main airport were suspended following heavy gunfire and shelling by the perimeter wall. President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, whose term ended on the 8th of February, has invited leaders of the country's 5 regional states for talks on the elections in the capital. All right, for more on this, Abdulaziz Bello joins us live from Mogadishu. Abdulaziz, welcome to Africa Live. What's the latest from there, and how is the current security situation in the country, Abdulaziz?
Well, Richard, calm has been restored in most parts of the city. Police maintain a tight presence in most of the intersections and key roads here in the capital, Mogadishu. As of Friday night, movement of people and vehicle were allowed by the police. But at the Mogadishu International Airport yesterday, 4 rocket-propelled grenades did hit the airport compound that is housing the country's airport, the African Union headquarters, and the United Nations base. As also base for foreign diplomats. Flights incoming, especially international flights, were rerouted to different other countries. Some didn't make it, but authorities at the Civil Aviation Authority say that things are back to normal. Flights have been arriving in the capital from neighboring countries, and also local flights are still operating. So the Somali Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble yesterday did talk to the nation and said that the country, the government allows demonstrations elections to take place as long as they're peaceful and they get the consent from security authorities. But at no given time will the Somali government allow protesters to take to the streets who are being protected by armed militias. Instead, the government says it is ready to provide protection to protesters, that the police can secure the protesters and they can protest peacefully, but there will be no armed protest that will take place in the capital, Mogadishu.
So, Abdulaziz, how does the future look from your perspective? Any progress in ending the election, Rao?
Well, the demonstration and the skirmishes that erupted on Friday in Mogadishu are linked to the elections, and it came at a very crucial time because the office of the Somali president last week announced that there will be election talks in the capital, Mogadishu, on the 18th and 19th. This was Thursday and Friday, but that didn't happen. Regional leaders are supposed to come to the capital, Mogadishu, to meet with the federal leadership to strike a deal and end the months-long electoral impasse, but that has not yet happened. Two regional leaders managed to arrive in the capital on Thursday, but the other leaders who are expected to come on Friday did issue a statement. That is the Jubaland and Puntland leaders. They say due to the security concerns happening in Mogadishu, they will not be able to come at this given time. They will be monitoring the situation until things normalize. So it's not clear whether the venue will be shifted to either Jubaland or Puntland or any other regional state because of the security concerns here in the capital. But there is growing pressure among international actors, especially the United Nations, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, the African Union, as well as the United States government. They're pushing for Somali leaders to meet and strike a compromise and end the months-long election stalemate that has delayed for quite a while now. The mandate of the president, as you mentioned, expired on the 8th of February. The mandate of the Senate and Parliament also expired in December 27, 2020, even though there's a clause in the election agreement that stipulates that office holders will remain in place until new occupants are elected. So that agreement still remains in place, and it's the backbone in which the international community as well as the Somali authorities are saying that all agreements must be based on this September 17th agreement. The opposition, on the other end, they're saying that there will be mass protests that will take place here in the capital. They've not given a specific date, but authorities are saying that there's a new COVID strain that has erupted in Somalia, and there will be no protest at all based on this new development.
Okay, let's leave it there for now. Abdulaziz Bello, thank you for bringing all of that there to light. We appreciate your insights. Let's move on. Mali's interim government has said it will pursue dialogue with jihadists and hold elections. Interim Prime Minister Mukhtar Uwane while presenting his plan in the capital Bamako, said he will make every effort to organize free and fair elections. Uwane came into power 6 months after a military coup ousted President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita. Months of protests drove Keita out due to his failure to solve Mali's long-running jihadist conflict and perceived corruption. The interim government is meant to reform the constitution and decentralize power in the ethnically diverse country. It is also meant to hold national elections by the end of its 18-month mandate. But there are growing discontent with the interim government's slow pace of reforms. Critics have accused Uwane of appointing figures with army links to dominate the post-coup government. Uwane, on the other hand, has assured he will press on with reforms. The government is struggling to quell a jihadist insurgency that first emerged in 2012. The insurgency has cost the lives of thousands of people. Uwane says the government will recruit an additional 25,000 soldiers and redeploy forces across the nation.
The second priority of the Axis concerning the adoption of a social stability pact aims at dialoguing with radical groups in Mali. Since 2017, more and more voices in Mali are calling for dialogue with our brothers who have joined radical groups. This is a demand that has been expressed many times over.
The problem that will arise when negotiating with radical groups in Mali is that Malians say it is necessary to negotiate with radical groups. But does the international community agree?
The action plan is really good. It's really well done. Well, now we're going to discuss it on Monday to try and see the amendments that we can propose and the rectifications that we must make so that it fits into the framework of understanding all Malians.
Well, the news continues on Africa Live. A lot more to come after the break. Here's a look at what's ahead. The latest on U.S. extreme weather as shortages continue to bite in Texas. And Sahara harmattan wind season hits West Africa.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Syria,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back, everyone, to Africa Live. The U.S. state of Texas is bracing for another night of record low temperatures amid ongoing severe winter storms. President Joe Biden says he will sign a major disaster declaration for the state and plans to visit Texas next week. Electricity has been largely restored, but millions are still without water. Edith Tiasan reports from a makeshift water distribution center at a middle school in Fort Worth.
The power is back on for most Texans, but the same couldn't be said for water. In fact, for the last couple of days, many Texans lack access to clean and drinking water. Many retail stores, grocery stores are now out of stock for very basic bottled drinking water, and that's why some of these locations, including high schools, middle schools, and even fire stations, have now been turned into water distribution centers here in Fort Worth and several other cities across the state of Texas, as many people are now lining up to get their hands on a case of drinking water.
We've been using bottled water, even to make coffee. So
we're about out.
Yes, and we're about out. So that's why we came by here. But we appreciate I don't know who's doing this, whether it's the school or the Keller Police, whatever, but we appreciate that.
Did you notice the shortage in other areas as well? Did you notice, did you try to get it somewhere?
Oh yes, especially yesterday. We went to Walmart, to Sam's, to Aldi, several different places, CVS, and amazingly the shelves not only are empty of water, but just about everything else. It's almost scary how scarce everything is.
And this will be the situation for the next few days, if not weeks, because experts say restoring the supply of water may not be as easy as restoring power. And that's because several water treatment plants in multiple locations have been damaged in the extraordinary weather conditions, and water pipes have burst in freezing temperatures in multiple neighborhoods. So this is going to be an ongoing situation, we understand, and politically speaking, officials are already pointing fingers at each other. The state governor, Greg Abbott, denies any responsibility in this incident. He continues to blame the ERCOT, the electricity, the independent body that manages the state's electricity grid, for what has happened. Although in a phone conversation with the US President Joe Biden, we understand that he will now receive more federal support, especially from FEMA, the Federal Emergency and Management Agency, which will be providing generators and more supplies in the coming days. It is Tian Shan, CGTN, Fort Worth, Texas.
To Senegal now, and a dust storm brought by dry winds from the Sahara is causing havoc in Dakar. The cloud of dust is reducing visibility, choking residents, and disrupting businesses. The dust is part of an annual occurrence known as harmattan, which takes place between November and March. The dry winds sweep clouds of dust from the Sahara into much of West Africa and the Gulf of Guinea region. The Senegalese Environment Ministry has issued a health and air quality warning. Dakar residents have been advised to avoid outdoor sporting activities, and children, older people, and those with respiratory problems have also been advised to remain indoors. Fishermen working in the Senegalese capital say the dust has brought their work to a standstill.
This is a very big difficulty, since visibility is very poor at the moment. To find our way around or to go fishing is very difficult. It has mostly stalled our work since we do not have the means available to do industrial fishing like GPS. So instead, we do artisanal fishing. So there's no other means of being able to orient ourselves.
It really ruined our work. A lot of customers didn't come. Also, for those of us with toddlers with poor health like mine, who are not yet a year old, I cannot work properly. I had to leave my child with my sister so that I could come to work. Yesterday, I couldn't work because of the dust. I had to go home. This dust does not suit us at all.
The dust bothers us. It really bothers our customers and is not good for our health. Sometimes, some of our customers buy things from us, but it's not like it used to be. It's already complicated with COVID-19, but now they also tell us that they have no money.
Empirically, what we are saying is that some patients who suddenly develop asthma without atopy in the family, for example, meaning they have a genetic predisposition for getting asthma.
Dozens of Algerian political detainees have been released under a new directive of President Abdelmadjid Tebboune. Now, among them is journalist Khalid Dareni, who has been rallying for press freedom in the country. The prisoners were held during a protest movement that forced former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika from power in 2019. Dareni was arrested in March last year after covering a protest as a journalist. He was later sentenced to 2 years in prison on charges of incitement and undermining national unity.
I would like to thank all the citizens, the lawyers, journalists, Algerians, and all the other people outside of this country who showed their solidarity with us, because our cause of free and independent journalism is just, as is the cause of all prisoners of conscience, and they will all be released.
Of course, this is a good thing in the context of appeasement. The release of prisoners of conscience has always been one of the main demands recently. Freedoms are regressing, but now we will see what happens with the new decisions taken and the decisions that will be taken after.
We did not come for the prisoners of conscience. We've come to liberate Algeria and restore its dignity and to preserve the trust of the martyrs. The release of the detainees is not the principal demand. It is an important one, but the main one is to free Algeria.
Nigerian security forces say they are tracking an armed gang that kidnapped 42 people from a school on Wednesday. The kidnapping in Kagara, central Niger state, was the latest mass abduction in Nigeria. A state official said 27 students, 3 teachers, and relatives of school staff were kidnapped. Gunmen in military uniforms stormed Government Science College in Kagara, killing 1 student and took others into a nearby forest. Families have appealed to the government to help free the victims. President Muhammadu Buhari, on his part, has ordered security forces to coordinate the rescue. The latest abduction comes 2 months after 300 students were kidnapped from a school in Katsina State. The boys were later released after negotiations with government officials.
Our priority is to bring boys and other kidnapped victims back home safely. But going forward, this cannot continue like this forever. So going forward, we need to put some things in place to address this issue once and for all. I honestly believe that we have suffered enough of these banditry activities.
In Zimbabwe, a nationwide vaccination program is underway after being launched on Thursday. Health workers, police officers, soldiers, and prison officials are among the first people to be inoculated. The 200,000 jabs being used are a donation from China. The Zimbabwe government has procured an additional 600,000 doses, which are expected in March for further rollout. The government plans to eventually vaccinate 10 million Zimbabweans to achieve herd immunity. Authorities are encouraging citizens to remain vigilant and continue to observe protocols to curb infections.
The vaccines are being rolled out to the district. They're actually being transported to the districts to cater for the frontline workers. For the city of Harare, we already have our vaccines. We are in the process now of distributing them to our various clinics. We don't want people to come to Wilkins. We want people to be vaccinated at their workstations.
What is needed is only to be educated about the drug. So sometimes people are saying they can't take, it's because they don't know much about the drug. So I think they need to understand about it, then I don't think there is any problem to take it.
People should know that for us to win against pandemics, we need what we call herd immunity. And herd immunity can come through two ways. One, via vaccination, where we have to vaccinate at least 70% of the population, or through natural immunity, where about 70% of the population has to suffer first in order for us to get rid of such pandemics. But if you are going to look at the world population of about 9 billion or 8 billion, and you expect 70% to suffer first, it means 6 billion people should suffer first before the pandemic goes. That's why we say vaccines are very important.
A public health campaign that surveyed millions of Egyptians has uncovered alarming figures for non-communicable diseases. The 100 Million Healthy Lives campaign conducted free checkups for diabetes, hypertension, and obesity. Nutritionists recommend turning to indigenous foods to create healthier dishes. Here is Adel El Mahroui with a special recipe for one of these healthier Egyptian dishes, green taro.
Because meat is expensive for most people in Egypt, they rely on plant-based nutrition. Yet that doesn't necessarily mean that Egyptians eat healthy. The WHO says that more than 70% of citizens are overweight or obese, and 40% of adults suffer from high blood pressure.
We sometimes ruin nutritious food with the way we cook it. For example, when we make fava beans, which Egyptians love, we add to it half a bottle of oil to give it a nice taste. That's a very bad habit. And when food is cooked healthy, the amount of food we eat in a meal is usually unhealthy.
One of the few Egyptian dishes that is considered healthy is green taro. It is a starchy root vegetable with a mild sweet taste. Taro is rich in fiber and resistant starch, which could help in keeping blood sugar at normal levels. The high potassium content in the dish could reduce blood pressure.
We cook it with greens, not with tomato sauce. These are true traditional ways to cook it. This is our favorite way. It's healthier this way than with the tomato one. The tomato dish makes you feel very heavy.
Mixing tomato sauce with vegetables is popular in Egypt. Lula's mother's recipe, however, adds a green stew to the taro. Containing coriander, dill, parsley, and Swiss chard, the mixture boosts the nutritional benefits of the dish. And with a kick of garlic, it becomes very tasty.
The green taro is one of my favorite dishes. It is my favorite food in the winter. I consider it an essential. I can eat it more than once in a day and I do not get tired of it.
Green taro is preferably boiled in meat stew, which comprises nearly 75% of its cost. The dish can cost nearly $7 to make. It's a lot for a family that earns roughly $200 a month.
I enjoy cooking it because it's easy to make. It doesn't consume much time and it's very nutritious. It's best served with meat. The dish gets you full quickly and it could stay till the next day.
Lula has been cooking green taro since she turned 11. That's when her mother passed on the family's recipe. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Africa Live. We'll see you on the other side of the break with our business segment. Here's a peek at the headlines. A South African entrepreneur takes on tire recycling with a trendy touch. And newly planted coffee trees boost Uganda's coffee exports.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back to Africa Live. We appreciate your company. South Africa is a good market for tire recycling as it generates more old tires than all other southern African countries put together. A young lady from Rustenburg in South Africa has taken up this opportunity to recycle old tire tubes into trendy luxury bags. CGTN's Richard Nta reports.
After 5 years of working in the recycling industry, Ria Betswe Ngwane thought of getting creative. She began using old tires to make luxury handbags.
Given my background in recycling, having started my first initiative recycling plastics, it was inevitable that the next business would also be within the recycling industry. Attire started as a result of work that we've been commissioned to do by the government to assist in facilitating the tire recycling within our province, the Northwest Province. And having received excess tire tubes from respective transporters as well as community members, we sought ways to find how we could create products out of the excess tire tubes, because this was the one product that was not being recycled.
An estimated 11 million tires enter the South African market every year. This leads to old, unused tires piling up. But the government's waste management system, which has integrated tire recycling, has improved. Tire recycling is now near 60%, but breaking down this rubber is no easy job.
We then wash the tire tubes because they've been exposed to all sorts of environments, so we try to get the dirt out of the tire tubes and get them as clean as possible. Then from there they go through to our factory, where they are then processed and cut into the respective patterns of the bags that we make, be it the retail bags that we're currently supplying through stores in different malls, or be it the bags that we make for the mining and construction industries. The tire tubes get converted into those bags, cut into those patterns, and then eventually sewn into the final product that can go into market.
Tires are necessary but never thought of as beautiful. But Ngwane's bags are attracting plenty of customers. The bags are not only pleasing to the eye, they're also extremely durable.
The space have provided us with the opportunity of retailing through some of the biggest malls in our country, such as Mall of Africa. This has honestly expanded our brick and mortar sales, but also has impacted our online sales, because through the referral of our brick and mortar, as well as through the advertising that we conduct through social media, this has grown our online store quite vastly.
COVID-19 has been tough for everyone, including the tire business. But Ngwane has managed to hold on to all of her employees and has plans to start exporting to the rest of Africa. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Uganda has registered a 22% increase in coffee exports since 2019. Recent figures from the Coffee Development Authority show coffee exports grew by more than 970,000 bags last year. Now that's the highest since 1991. The growth has been driven by newly planted coffee trees and good weather. CGTN's Michael Baleke reports.
From February 2020 to January 2021, Uganda exported 5.5 million bags of coffee, worth $500 million. That's compared to 5 million bags worth 480 million US dollars the previous year. The Uganda Coffee Development Authority attributes the increase in quantity and value to the fruition of newly planted coffee.
The source of the production was the plantings we did by distributing free seedlings, by training farmers, and farmers really coming in, like you and me, to start planting coffee. So we've seen these plantings now in production.
Uganda is among the top 10 coffee producers in the world. The Coffee Development Agency says the export numbers would have been higher, but the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic have affected handling, transportation, and shipments.
Unfortunately, we are in a depressed coffee pricing system. Prices for the last 2-3 years have been going down, but they are now starting to appreciate. This is not a unique situation with Uganda, but it is a global situation.
Coffee has been Uganda's leading cash crop for decades and also a top agricultural foreign exchange earner. Economic analysts argue that maintaining a positive performance will highly depend on how fast COVID-19 vaccines are rolled out and the course of the virus and its new variants. The Bank of Uganda recently warned that the country's economic recovery had somewhat lost momentum due to a surge in COVID-19 infection rates.
There are no indications that the economy will bounce back quickly. The only assumption is that with the rollout of the vaccine, which essentially would lower infection rates and be able to give people confidence that this pandemic can be fought, there is no any other reason to say that this economy will gain the momentum that it has lost.
Uganda set a target to increase coffee exports to 20 million bags per year by 2025. But the uncertainty created by the pandemic is likely to affect the projected timelines. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Tanzania has set a new goal of welcoming 5 million tourists annually over the next 5 years. The country's recently appointed Tourism and Natural Resources Minister is starting a 9-region tour to meet tourism players and discuss ways to revitalize the sector. Medium and small-scale players in Tanzania's tourism sector hope these government plans will help revive their businesses. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
Tinga Tinga is a unique painting style created by the Tanzanian artist Edward Saidi Tinga Tinga 50 years ago. The famed dot motif style has inspired a generation of artists who depend on selling artwork to tourists as a means to feed their families. But global travel restrictions due to COVID-19 have cut their business by 90%. This market in 2019 was once visited by thousands of tourists each year, but now it is empty. Edin Denje, the chairman of the Tinga Tinga cooperative and an artist himself, says the government's desire to increase tourism earning gives them hope.
In that new target of 5 million visitors, we as Tinga Tinga Society can attract even 2 million tourists. We leave the 3 million to others. I'm sure we can do that because globally, Tinga Tinga art is getting known and is well received.
It's not just the Tinga Tinga Center that has been hit. The Tanzania Tourism Board says just 800,000 tourists visited last year, a 47% plunge from 2019. During his re-election campaign, Tanzanian President John Magufuli promised to more than double the 2019 visitor numbers.
In the next 5 years, we have plans to increase the number of tourists to 5 million by the year 2025.
But Tanzania's handling of the pandemic could deter tourists. The government has not released COVID-19 data since May, so there's no clear understanding of how widespread the virus has become, especially now as new, more transmissible variants take hold. There is also no clear vaccination strategy, but earlier this month, the health minister said the country has no plans in place to accept COVID-19 vaccines and encourage citizens to take precautions like washing hands, but also to use herbal blends to boost immunity. That plan could hinder liftoff in the sector, which accounts for 17% of Tanzania's GDP and employs about 4 million Tanzanians. Those in the industry are taking matters into their own hands. Jamila Kawawa, a travel agent, says her company has reduced their service charge and are working on offers to entice travelers. But she says government support is key.
If the government works hard to promote all these places, we will hit that target and possibly even exceed that number.
According to the Bank of Tanzania, Tanzania's tourism earnings dropped to $1 billion in 2020, something that Edie, Jamila, and other small tourism players can attest to. They hope the Minister of Tourism's regional tour can offer solutions to a challenge that affects their very livelihoods. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Let's turn to logistics in Kenya now. The price of imported goods and demand for freight containers have surged amid the coronavirus pandemic. COVID-19 restrictions have also led to the backlog at the coastal port of Mombasa. CGTN's Terry Wangari has this report.
The Kenya Ports Authority says the container traffic at the port of Mombasa in 2020 is an estimated 1.36 million 20-foot equivalent units. However, with the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, there has been a drop in cleared cargo to an estimated 1.1 million 20-foot equivalent units.
On average, in one day, we handle 1,800 TEUs. 35% is for the transit countries. That's about 600 to 650 TEUs. And then the remaining 5% is 5 to 10% is for transshipment. And then the rest, about 60%, is for the local market.
Despite the rise in freight prices, there is still a huge demand for construction materials, medical supplies, and daily essentials.
Currently, it's around $5,000 for a 40-footer, which used to be around $1,900, $1,800 before the pandemic. We average receive about 1,800 to 2,000 TEUs a month imports. And we continue to receive this because the demand is there.
The coronavirus pandemic has affected the efficiency of international logistics owing to the restrictions put in place worldwide. A large number of empty containers are backlogged in some countries' ports.
The major reason is the pandemic, which made some ports and some countries go into lockdown. And because of these lockdowns, you could not get the containers out from those locations. And the shipping lines also could not call at that ports because it is not viable for them to call at a port where they cannot get their movement done. They have to discharge, they have to load.
In an attempt to curb the ongoing delays, the Kenya Ports Authority has embarked on strengthening operations to improve efficiency. This includes reduction of cargo dwell time and reorganizing planning of units. The addition of the standard gauge railway freight train and introduction of double-deck trucks has also led to a reduction in cargo detention at the ports. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Tunisia has signed a $1.5 billion agreement with the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation. The deal is aimed at supporting Tunisian state-owned companies and diversifying the tourism-dependent economy. From Tunis, here is Adnan Chouachi with more details.
The Tunisian Ministry of Economy, Finance and Investment Support announced that the framework cooperation agreement between the government and the ITFC during the period 2021-2023 is worth $1.5 billion. Some $500 million per year will be used to finance imports of raw materials needed by public enterprises.
The first agreement is for financing of 100 million euros. It's intended to finance the natural gas needs imported by STEG for the production of electricity. The second agreement aims to finance the supply of raw materials to the Tunisian chemical group. It is worth $50 million.
ITFC Corporation Manager at the Ministry of Economy and Finance noted that the subsidy agreement was also signed. It will cover the cost of subscriptions to virtual training platforms of the National Center for Educational Technologies. The project is part of its distance learning program being implemented due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
The financing agreement will support Tunisian enterprises and the national economy during the pandemic. The ITFC offers a competitive financial package and a favorable loan repayment schedule. Tunisia's ties with the International Islamic Trade Financial Corporation, which is part of the Islamic Development Bank, dates back to 1974. The corporation has always been successful.
The ITFC announced that its financial and commercial support to Tunisia's development is part of its efforts to diversify the local economy and stimulate recovery after the impact of COVID-19.
Despite the challenges and the difficulties facing the economy, the Tunisian government is serious about striking deals which serve public interest and state-owned companies. We are trying to provide the necessary financial resources from different sources, including loans, to revive the economy.
The International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation's financing was provided to the Tunisian electricity and gas company STEC, the Tunisian Chemical Group, the Tunisian Refining Industries company STEER, and Al Fulad, the Tunisian Steel Company. The ITFC provided $1.5 billion over 3 years under the framework agreement signed in 2018 to stimulate and diversify the Tunisian economy. Authorities say the new $1.5 billion financing will help access trade development programs to drive exports and promote inter-regional trade with other African and Arab countries. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And we're not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here are the headlines. Sports enthusiasts impressed by new sports infrastructure in Uganda.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Welcome into Sport on Africa Live. Let's talk a bit of football. Football is a popular sport in Uganda, but finding appropriate facilities for the game has been a challenge. However, that is changing. Uganda's capital city, Kampala, is seeing an increase